cloud first. So this first little bit of the class, we're gonna be talking a little bit, or I'm going to be talking, so questions and whatnot. Thank you for coming for color theory in the landscape with pastel. We're gonna kind of go back a little bit to some of the basics in terms of, it's not just about pastel painting techniques for this 6 weeks. It's also about color and value and how we see it and how to better interpret it and how to push your limits a little bit more. How to go outside of the norm of green trees and green grass and blue sky. We do a little bit of that. You guys have all painted with me enough to know that we do push little extra bits of color in places that doesn't necessarily belong, or if we want to enhance, with pinks and goldens and all these sorts of things. But we first have to start with value. And value is just that, in the most simplistic form, it's light and dark, period. That's what it is. But once you throw color into value is when things start to get a little muddy. And that's where you find those confusing times when you're trying to do a big landscape scene. You have a row of trees. And how do you get those row of trees to not just be a big fat green blob? How do you make them look more natural? And that's when value comes into play. When we step back, when I tell you guys all the time, stop and step back, stop and step back, what's going to come at you is more about value than, I'm going to mute a couple people, so just in case, so we don't hear shuffling. It's more about value is what's going to stand out. So when you step back, you see your overall composition, you see some of the colors, but you overall see value. And that's what makes your composition readable. When somebody has a strong composition, not only are the shapes important, it's the value that makes it important and makes it work a little bit better. So the more I think about this, the more I talk about it, the better I'm getting at kind of taking apart my own work and seeing where I can improve. And I think if you just kind of keep that in your head as you're going, you're just going to keep improving more and more. Value when it comes to colors, that's going to be kind of our first little exercise here with the grayscale. But just as a little, so FYI, this curriculum, this plan that I have for this 6 weeks is also, I'm teaching it in person in Ocean City. And so they're kind of my guinea pigs. They have a 2-hour class with me in person. And so then this is like me doing it again. So I get to kind of work out some kinks. But one of the things that we all kind of get hung up on is our concept of what we think a color means and what we think that color is. So for instance, we were working on our tree exercise and one of the students was using this hot pink as her light value. And in our minds, yeah, hot pink, it's bright, it's, it's in your face, it's colorful. But when you step back and you looked at it against the blue sky, they were the same value. They were both a mid-tone. So that hot pink did her no good. And those are the things that I want to tackle over these 6 weeks is how to choose colors a little bit better. We all get stuck on greens. How many times do we choose a green over and over? And we're looking for that perfect shade of green. We need to find that perfect value of green. And then we can kind of go from there. So color theory is all fancy just for how colors relate to one another. There is a scientific side to it. I mean, I've read some books on it, and there's all things about how the color refracts in your eye when the light hits it and these two play. And I'm not a scientist. That doesn't appeal to me, and I couldn't regurgitate it if I tried. But I look at color theory more about our own observations. And we all have those feelings of how colors make us feel, how color combinations make us feel. I always like to bring up the Boise, Idaho college football team, Boise State, I think it is. They have blue AstroTurf and blue and orange uniforms. And if you've ever watched that on TV, you feel like gouging your eyeballs out. It's too much. It's too bright. It's too, I can't imagine how those poor guys actually even play, because I think I would go cross-eyed over time. Now in a painting, that Crayola blue against just a bright orange, it's electrifying. And in the right setting, it can make your painting come alive. So those are the types of things I want to look at over these couple of weeks. So I'm going to readjust my camera here. So pay attention to my easel down below or wherever it shows up on your screen. And I'm going to stop the video on, since all you see is this. I'm going to stop this video here. Oh, that was the last picture we were working on. All right, I'm going to pin myself so it's bigger. A spotlight, I should say. There we go. So now you can see my phone keeps freezing, and I might have to switch it over to 4G instead of the home network. I'll turn a brighter light on. Maybe that helps too. These little extra lights are a little bit blinding from time to time. Okay, so grayscales, I have them. They come as a part of, if you buy a color wheel pack, a lot of times there's a grayscale thrown in there. And I used to think it was pointless. I didn't use it very well, and I'm still getting used to using it. But this all will help you as we go through this. You can keep one handy as we go and just test things out. So you can test when a painting is too light, too dark, and all that kind of good stuff, where you're trying to find the right value. So our first little exercise is going to be something super quick. I'll actually show you the other 2 days, because I did this up in Ocean County as well. So what I want you to do is find 3 pastel, a dark, a medium, and a light. They don't have to be, they can be in the same color family to keep it simple, or they can be different colors. It's up to you. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to tape up the ones that I did previously before I pick my colors. You can use black. I'd prefer you to use some color at some point, just so you can see, it's on a gray scale. So we have the gray. We don't need extra gray. So in my 2 samples here, I have both of them use eggplant, a nice medium green up top and a light blue, and then a medium purple, violet, and a light pink. So I'm going to go ahead and pick 3 new colors. I'm going to use a dark navy this time. Ooh, and since I was talking about orange, I'll use an orange, a medium orange, and a light yellow. Now, as we go through these weeks, I'm finding that the hardest thing is when 2 colors are both the same value, but they're completely different colors. Just like when we talk about with a hot pink. I feel like a lot of people, including myself, get in trouble with those mid ranges. It's easy to see if something is super dark or super light, but when you're talking about colors being right in the middle of the road, it's really difficult to see. So take your dark and make a little splotch all the way across, one in each square or each rectangle. And the same with your medium. And the same with the light. All right, my navy looks just as dark as the eggplant does, so that's fine. But in these examples, you can really see how when you have something super dark, it kind of fades away to nothing. And what I really love is this middle one here with the blue as my light and then the pink as the light. On camera, you can't see that blue because the value is identical. So when you're picking colors and you see, okay, this blue looks like it's going to do the trick, and you put all this blue on there and it's not doing a darn thing, it's because it's not the right value. Not necessarily the wrong color, but the wrong value. And so down here, the pink doesn't show up in the lightest. It completely blends in with the white, which makes sense because it came in a set of true lights from Terry Ledwig. So all of them have a little bit of a tint to it, which become apparent up against something darker. But in the light column, it's completely gone. Now up top, the colors that I just used, the navy blue, the orange, and the yellow stays pretty consistent. It's close to this value. It's the closest to that. Same thing with the blue. It's the closest to that value. But look at how dark it seems on the white and how bright it is on the black. These little scraps of grayscale are honestly something I will probably keep out for a while. And it's something that not only a scrap of the color paper that you use for your paintings, this can be super useful to help you determine. And whether or not you use it as a scrap paper, maybe you go and you purchase, hold on, let me pull out my other grayscale. All right, I put my official grayscale away, never mind. And it comes in a little laminated strip. And usually the grayscales you purchase have a much wider variety of grays. So you can really narrow it down. But I think, you know, as you can hold that grayscale up to your painting and see where each section falls so you can pick your colors a little bit better. I'm going to unpin myself and then I want to see what everybody is doing. I want you to hold yours up. I guess I got to change my view back to gallery view. All right, so hold yours up if you've got it done, or if you have questions, let me know. You can unmute yourself and ask any questions if you're struggling. Perfect, Wayne. That's exactly it. Good, good, good.
I didn't get mine, so I never got it printed.
Okay, that's fine. But you get the idea. You understand.
Patty sent it to me. I'll print it later and I'll do the
All right, good. Yes, Patty, that's, yeah. So that one comes with a lot of the, yep, Jeannie's got one too,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't print
And-
mine either. I didn't see it, so I'll print it later.
Yeah, but that's exactly it. And you know what? Those little, I like those grayscales with the little notches in it because it almost helps it even more because you can kind of scoop up in and compare on your painting a little bit better. Yeah. All right. Good, Joe. Good. Good. Okay. All right, I'm going to spotlight myself again. So while we're switching around here, I'm going to take down my grayscale and I just have my scrap of paper up there. So if you have you don't have to put your scrap of paper up on your easel if you don't want to. I just have it up there for you guys. But the next thing we're going to be doing is thumbnail sketches for value. Now, some of you have already done some thumbnail sketches with me before, so this isn't entirely new. I am also terrible at doing thumbnail sketches. I don't do them often, but the more I paint, the more, ooh, hold on. Sometimes it doesn't like those extra lights and it becomes all weird. I'm trying to get enough light for you guys and then it gets all these weird stripies, although it's still kind of there. So thumbnail sketches are something that I am learning to embrace, I should say. For our purposes today, it's only going to be about value of one object. As we move forward, it's going to be about composition. It's going to be about composition and value. It's going to be about finding the right flow within your composition. All right, so like I said, I'm going to use that singular tree as my example. The reason I sent you this one as well is this is early morning light. It's probably about 8 or 9 in the morning, and I cropped out some of the water so you don't see it there, but the sun is up behind and it's shining through and you can see little dark patches and the bright sun coming through. So it's just a way to kind of observe the light of the day, the morning light coming through, which will be important in just a few minutes here. So the first thing, I'm going to tape up my tree. It is funny how I was looking through all of my own personal photo references and I have no photo references of a singular tree, which I guess makes sense for what I like to paint. So, it is what it is. But free downloads on the internet, always our friend. Especially for purposes like this, where we're not doing anything, we're using it for exercises. So you can watch for a minute. You don't have to do it along with me. You can watch first and then I'll give you time. Because we are moving right along. I have a whole set of grayscale markers. You certainly do not need that. You could use a Sharpie or you could use a black piece of charcoal, anything to get your darkest value. We only need 3 values. Your darkest dark, which is a black of something, a medium value, either a medium gray marker or just a pencil. So if you don't have any markers, you can use a black piece of charcoal and then pencil as your medium and then the white of the paper as your white. And that's all you need. I'm still going to use the white of the paper as my white and my black marker as my darkest. I'm going to, I know the paper that we're going to be working on. Later when we get our pastel out, it's going to be we're going to divide a piece of 9 by 12 into sections. So we're going to be doing 3 things. So we'll have a 4th empty square later on. So I'm not worried about that. You can draw with your marker, you can draw with your pencil, whatever is most comfortable for you. This first one, I'm just going to kind of keep with the light of the photograph itself. Looking at the values, the darkest value is over on the side. The brightness of the green is actually a medium value. It's not the lightest of the light. The sky, most of the sky is light. So the background is going to have a lighter value than the tree itself. However, as it shifts, the sky over here is a little bit bluer and it's closer to the value of the left side of the tree. So take a minute, step back from the photograph and squint at it. And as you're squinting at it, look at the blue in the sky in the top right corner and the brightness of the green on the left-hand side. And they're gonna be super similar. And you almost see 3 things. I am going to keep this super childlike and generic for the thumbnail. So if I squint, there's a little bit in there. Doesn't have to be exact. My little markers have those painterly tips to them, so that's always fun. And then the white of the paper is the white of everything else. So that's pretty much it. And this is super simple. It's a super simple tree in terms of its overall shape. It's kind of roundy moundy on top. It's dark on the right side, bright on the right side, but the sky is the lightest value. So go ahead and take a minute, observe your tree, do a quick thumbnail sketch. I'll give you just 5 minutes or so. We don't need anything serious. I'm going to stop the recording so we have enough, I don't run out of space. I'm going to pause it. These next 2, we're going to stretch your imagination a little bit because it's going to be a part of our assignment when we get into color. We're going to take this tree. Actually, we could put a little of that shadow in there. If you want to put in some ground, you can do that. We're going to take this tree and we're going to put it in 3 scenarios. The first scenario is what we just did. The second scenario is going to be, well, actually, I'm looking at it right now. So we're going to do morning, noon, and night. Okay, so this one is actually kind of a morning. You can, because the sun is obviously off on the left-hand side, so it's a little bit more of a morning pick. You could put the sun behind the tree and have the sunlight shining through, which is something I might do, or you can leave it off to the side and technically out of the picture. The next thing we're going to do is noon. So basically everything's coming from above. So how would that look in the tree branches? Where would that dark value be in the tree? Think about your values there. And then the last one is going to be a night scene, which is always fun. So think about that. A lot of times, so the time of day for the night scene is sun's down, the sky is that beautiful deep blue, but not a dark midnight sky. You can still see a little bit of that blue in the sky. And how would that look for you? So I'm going to go ahead and do, go ahead. Somebody had a question? No? Okay, so I'm gonna do my 2 sketches. If you want to wait and watch mine while you think about yours, you may. I'll give you plenty of time to do that. Or you can just get started. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just get my basic tree drawn in there again. My little generic roundy moundy tree. I'm gonna put that in both. And I'm gonna think about these clumps of leaves. Another thing that the thumbnail helps us with, and the value sketch for the thumbnail, is when we're painting trees, a lot of times, especially if it's fall trees and there's lots of colors in the trees, we think about the individual leaves and trying to represent the colors of those individual leaves. And that gets us in trouble every single time. If you're a hyper realist painter, you still need to start with a foundation, and the foundation is the value. And then you can put as much detail on top of it as you want later on. But for right now, we're just going to think about the value, and the leaves they clump together. They don't act as individual leaves, they act as a group. So that's the type of stuff we're going to think about. So this, here we go, middle of the day. I'm going to go ahead and put that shadow in there down there. And everything is really going to fall into lightness above. Now I have to think about the clumps of trees, the clumps of branches and leaves and such. So I'm going to put a little bit of the branching that I see on the photo reference, just a little bit of it. And then as those clumps form, there's going to be a lot of that value on top. So it's going to be a little bit more speckled because the light's coming from above and the branches come out and the little clumps of leaves are shadowed underneath, and then there's a little bit of bright on top. Now, if we're just doing 3 values, which we are today, this is fine as it is, right? But if we had a set of markers and you want to do a little bit more, you can, because now the sky is still probably the brightest value, but it's really going to get super close to the brightness of the leaves. So if you look outside, well, maybe not right now, my sky is gray, but when the sky is nice and perfectly blue and bright, like it is in midday, and you squint and you look at the light on the tops of those green leaves, it's really similar in value to the sky, but it's not exact, but it's not as bright as it was in the first one. So this is a piece of charcoal or a piece of NuPastel. And that's kind of what it ends up looking like. It's not quite bright. And depending on the tree, sometimes you have those really bright speckles of light that shine on top of the leaves sometimes. Like especially those waxy kind of evergreen leaves. They get those really bright white reflections. So that's midday-ish. Again, using imagination, not using a photo reference, but just getting your head thinking about it. Now, nighttime. Well, I'll give you a few minutes to work on that before I start talking more about nighttime. So go ahead and work on that if you haven't, or keep going if you are. I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so the last one is nighttime. So in the nighttime, trees are pretty much a shadow in general. They just, they're there. The light shining through, you know, you might see some, I'm going to leave it a little bit where you can have, I guess what you would consider sky holes, but just a little bit of branch holes, but everything is really quite heavy. Even if there is a little bit of light on the branches, it's going to be all really similar in value. It's not going to be a huge transition within the tree. But then the entire background becomes a mid-tone, and we almost don't even have a light tone at all. So I'm going to put that mid-tone in there inside the little holes in the tree, because that would be the sky behind it as it's all nice and dark. So this one's the simplest, in all honesty, and kind of fun once we get color to it. But it's pretty much just two values. There's not going to be that super light value unless you have a street light. But in our scenario, we're not going to have a street light. So go ahead and work on that if you haven't already. I'm going to pause. Now that I'm not on UART and I'm on this gray tone, that gray is adding a layer of value. So when I start painting, I need to consider that, right? I'm going to take the, stop, I'm not doing Bixby. Later. Okay. I'm going to take the camera over to my little bulletin board and I'll show you, pardon the shakiness. Okay, so these are the three trees from Tuesday's class. So we have the one with the orangey background is the sunrise. So the sun was behind it. A little bit different than what we're doing today because we have the sun kind of on the side, which I think we might have a better time with than the sun coming from behind it completely. And then we have the midday. And see how the green and the blue are pretty close, but not exact. And then we have the fun nighttime. My camera is freezing. Luckily, you're still seeing the picture. I was trying to get in closer to the blues. All right, I'll come back. Ooh. All right. So that's basically what we're going for, was we're going to take our thumbnails and make them into little paintings. And now, you know, now we get into the nitty gritty of color with value, the tricky part, the stuff that we're constantly learning on a regular basis. All right, I'm sorry that picture quality is being really weird. Let me give my phone a minute to relax. I'm thinking of the next investment would be to get a nice actual camcorder video camera. I've heard a lot of the other professionals, the really serious ones, have a nice camcorder to use for better light, better quality. It's so crazy.
They give you suggestions for make or model?
One of them did. I have to look it back up again. And they're, I mean, you know, they're anywhere from $200 to $600. And that's where, again, I'm, you know, have to do my little personal assessments to decide what direction I'm going with things. Okay, so I am going to put my tree reference back up because especially for the first one, just kind of gets me going and it'll help guide me with some of the shapes that I see in the tree. So this first one we're going to do as the photograph is. You know, as what we did in our first thumbnail sketch. If you want to paint along, go right ahead. All of you have enough experience to do so. I'm spoiled that I get to work with people that I've worked with in person. So I know exactly what you're doing and how you work. So I have an advantage. If I've never painted with you before, then it becomes a little trickier, but Zoom is okay when I know you. Okay, so like I said before, the gray of the paper is a part of the value scale right now. So I have to think about my thumbnail sketch, and my thumbnail, the brightest part is the background. It's the light in the sky. So I'm going to address that first. Just like we were doing any landscape painting, I'm going to put my sky in first because that's the furthest thing in the back, and we build from the back to the front. So I'm going to put my sky in, and now I'm going to find a light value. I'm going to keep it pretty real. It's going to be a light blue, but it needs to be the correct light blue. That's pretty light. It looks very gray though, which is fine too. I could go with the gray. Let me just see here. Maybe this one. Well, that's pretty. All right, I'm going to go with this blue. And I'm just going to kind of chunk in all around. I'll put in some sky holes within it. Now, once I get going, once I start to put in all those greens, I might need to adjust a little bit more. You know, I might have to lighten it up a little bit. On Tuesday, I had to lighten up my night sky because it was all too dark. When I stood back, I didn't have anything. See, I hate this paper. It's so, I feel like you really got to dig into it. So yeah, it was a good thing they stopped making that. All right, so as we're painting, you can use, we were talking about the 3 values, right? And we just used, for our grayscale, we only used 3 pastel, and for the thumbnails, we only used a dark, a medium, and the white of the paper. For this painting, feel free to use as many pastels as you want, but keeping in mind the value, keeping in mind, is it doing what you need it to do? Is it helping you to put that extra green in there? So really think about your choices, if it's working for you or not. So now that I've got my basic sky in there, I'm going to start with my dark value. Now I'm thinking about pasteling. I'm thinking about, I'm going to find my darkest darks, and I'm going to block them in. So I'm going to grab an eggplant. Well, or let's see, I'm going to test this. Ooh, okay. So this is a really dark navy. So you could go with your deep, dark ultramarine. You could go with black. Again, this is just an exercise in value. So if you want, you can do that. So in my thumbnail sketch, I went ahead and put that little shadow in there at the bottom, and I like it. So I'm going to put it back in again. And I'm just going to kind of block using the side of my pastel, looking back and forth between the photo reference and my thumbnail, kind of block in those shadows. And some of those shadows creep up even further into the right, just because of the way the clumps of leaves and branches are formed. So that was an ultramarine. I'm going to work in some dark green that is a similar value. So I'm going to test this. Ah, that's a perfect one. So on camera, this is actually the best place to do value lessons, especially for you guys, for seeing what I'm seeing. I just added a whole swatch of green in here and you can't see it on camera. Why? Because it's the same value. If I were to go up close to it, then you could be like, oh, there's green in there. I can see it now. The two colors together are playing together to make the eye and the viewer see what you want them to see, and they're creating its own little effect. But this is what we're talking about today. We're talking about that concept of I've got a green and a blue, and when I'm standing here up close in person, they're very distinct. When I step away, it fades into oblivion. But I want it to be a real tree, so I'm putting that green in there along with the blue. And I can put in some of the brown of the tree trunk. There's a little bit of light on it, so you can see that a little bit on camera, but I can put that in there. I can go ahead and grab an eggplant, and before I go into the lighter values, I can put in some of the branches that you see, a little bit hinting here and there. There's a lot of branches that are visible in this particular tree, so I can start to kind of block some of them in. I'm going to move the camera a little closer before I add the other colors so you can see what's going on. So as I get closer, now you can see distinctly the blue, the green, the eggplant, and that brown. Boy, I hate this paper. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pull it back again. I'm going to add that medium to light value green. That's too light. Let's try this one. It's pretty bright, but I'm going to go with it for just a minute. It's very Crayola-y, which is fine too. So I'm just blocking it in. I'm not worried about this being a final painting. So I'm just kind of looking at my thumbnail, kind of blocking in where I see things. There's a little bit of light popping through right in the middle. And just a sprinkle over here. Not much, but just a sprinkle. I'm going to go one shade brighter, lighter, higher key, so to speak. That's another term people like to use for value in light and dark, whether the painting is in a high key or a low key. A high key just means it's super bright. A low key just means it's super dark. So you think about the paintings in the Renaissance, the high Renaissance, where those portraits were like all dark and moody in some kind of a, dark chamber, highly refined, but they're a low key painting. Everything was all, the lightest value of the painting was dark still. So in person, I love this brighter green that I put on. On camera, it's hard to see. The values are a little closer than I thought they were, but that's okay. It's still working per my thumbnail sketch. Now I'm gonna add some more of those sky holes in there. And I think I'm gonna add them a little bit brighter because I don't like that blue. So I'm gonna go up a notch. All right, that's the same. Maybe I'll go into the turquoise family. I'll just do that. This, on this paper, this looks a little bit gray, which is fine, but just bring in some of that. Actually, it looks completely white now, so I'll have to fix this. So this is keyed too light. This is too bright for what I want. But you can see all this value through the tree, and that's what helps make it. Gonna add some blue on top. Okay. My bandwidth is low. All right, why did everything get small? All right, I'm gonna switch to 4G. All right, I'm gonna stop recording for a minute. Okay, so if I'm looking at my thumbnail sketch for my midday, I'm thinking about those values. The blue of the sky is probably a close value to the gray of my paper. It's going to be a little bit darker. Darker blue, right? Because I want to get that value in there. So let me see. So I don't want to go too dark, right? Because it's midday, it's not nighttime. I just want something a little bit, it's not as bright and light as this first one. It's going to go a little bit darker. So I'm going to grab a medium blue and see where that takes me. It's funny, I'm looking at my pastels going, no, I like that pastel too much and I don't want to waste it on on an exercise. This is probably a little more electric. I might be adjusting this. This is pretty, it's pretty bright. Pretty dark in value, but I'm just gonna kind of blob it in there for my background. Get some of those sky holes represented. And, you know, once I start to get the greens all around it is when I'll really notice if it's too dark or not dark enough. But I'm assuming if anything, it'll be too dark. But I'll just get that in there. Now, for my dark value, I'm still going to stick with that same color family of this really dark blue at first, or you can use your eggplant, or you can use black. If I'm looking at my thumbnail, I got a nice little shadow down here from the bottom of the tree. Again, looking at my thumbnail, because I'm making this up, my photo reference is only going to help so much at this point if I'm changing the time of day. So I've got all those underneath shadows. Put in some of those branches. Again, nothing fancy. Just talking about value. I'm going back in with that same green, that same dark value green to go with my blue. Just to add some character. You know, just green by itself can be kind of bland and boring. But when you have some nice ultramarine blues, or you go into the reds as a complement to darken things up, that's always nice too. Because it's midday, I could go with a couple of different medium values. And this is where we would all kind of go in, right? We would all kind of start to see all these greens and kind of go to town, right? You see all these bright colors on the leaves and now if I stand back, that lighter color, as much as I like it and I like what it was doing, I've lost a lot of my value shift. I've lost a lot of that depth that I had in the beginning. So now I'm going to have to go back and touch it up. Get some of that more of those shadows in there. I can always go back and punch in the sky holes through there, which I will. This paper is so weirdly grainy. It's making things a little blobby for me, but that's all right. We'll get there. So now that I've kind of moved it all around, it worked itself out a little bit. I don't like the shape of that. I know it's just an exercise, but even still, I like to have the right shape. So now for the high key, now for the lightest color to sit on top. You can go into the yellow family for this one, especially midday if you got that sunlight shining brightly. There's always a little bit on the tips. There's going to be little bits and pieces that are caught all throughout. Right now, I'm trying not to make little stripes of brightness going down the line here. That's kind of fun looking. Now I'm going to pop in some of those sky holes again. I don't have a lot of branches in this one, so I can go ahead and do that. So if this was a real painting, I would be working a lot on the branch structure and things like that. But for value, now I'm going to take a step back and see where I'm at. So I want to see, now I'll be able to tell for sure if that blue is the right blue or if it needs to be brightened up. But a lot of times I can't tell until I step back. It's an interesting blue. On camera, it's a bit lighter than it is in person. And it could probably use a little bit lighter. It's kind of creating an interesting time of day feel everything I pick up is about the same value, but I don't want to go, blues are always that tricky kind of family where if you go too light, it goes really gray and dull and icky. So yeah. Let's see. That's so light. That's probably good. So the two of them together could be blended a little bit. Yeah, so you can kind of see how the bottom of over here, I have the two blues working together. I like that a bit more than just, I love this blue in general, but the initial blue, but it's not quite right for my value scale. So the two of them together work kind of nicely. I'm going to pause the recording now. Let you guys. All right, so our last one, nighttime. So there has to be a color adjustment for this one. There's not going to be any of those bright colors. The brightest green is still going to be on the dark side of the value scale. It won't be the darkest, but it'll be pretty darn dark. And you know, at this time of night when you have that, you know, the sun is set, you have some, you can still see a little bit of that blue before it gets really, really dark. You still can see some of the green, but it's just not highlighted. Kind of think about like a full moon if you want to, just to have a little bit of light. But really, your lightest green, let me, hold on, we'll do a little tester. So I'm going to put up a scrap piece, another piece of paper here. So let's talk about these greens and we'll talk about the blues before we put them down. How about that? I love doing nightscapes, but actually, Doug, you have one of my favorite nightscapes. I don't get out to do them enough, or I don't have enough photo references to do them, but nightscapes are so fun. A whole different color palette, whole different sense of light and dark. Yeah, it's just really fun. Okay, so if I'm thinking about my greens in the tree, we're still going to have that dark blue. Oh, off the camera, hold on. We're still going to have that dark blue or your eggplant. I'm going to put, so that's my dark blue, and there's eggplant next to it. On camera, it is a very, very slight variation. In person, up close, it reads nicely. You can see the blue versus the eggplant. From a distance, they become one. Again, that's value. They're both at a really dark value. So here's the green I have been using as the dark value. Again, up close, I can see blue, eggplant, and green. From a distance, not so much. The next green I have been using today is this one. That's a nice medium green. It stands out next to the green. That's probably going to be my lightest green today for this nighttime scene. The other two greens, put up here. One was a yellow green. One is a chartreuse. But you can see quite a difference, quite a jump in there. With the paper though, these bright greens layered on top of this medium green worked out really nicely. I didn't have to worry about blending too much. So let's talk about the blues of the sky. So let's play here. I've got This is from my Terry Ludwig night set. It is super hard. Scrub that into the paper there. That's a nice, pretty night blue, right? It looks a nice night sky. In person, it's a little bit brighter than it appears on camera. This is the blue that I used the last time during the day. Look how electric that blue looks now next to that dark blue. So let's try a couple other blues. Well, let's see. This is the blue from above in the tree. What a difference that makes. We're not going to use that in the sky at all. This is a little bit of a gray tone to it, but the value is the same. One's just a little flatter than the other. So I would probably go with that first one over this one, because this one just kind of, it has a little, like I said, a little bit of that gray property. It flattens things out. That's pretty. All right, so it might be a combination of these two. This one's too bright by itself, but this one might end up being too dark because remember, it's going up against these. So hold on. So that's the sky. If it's going right up against these dark colors here for the tree, I don't know that that's enough of a value switch. So if I put a little bit of that on top, that's pretty nice. So take a minute and play with your colors. Play with the colors that you already have out and think about your nighttime sky and how you can develop your nighttime sky. If you don't have a lot of blues, you can take any of these blues, like, so this is that first navy blue, and then you can take some of your other blues, put it on top, and just kind of play with what color combinations you could use by layering or blending to get the right value of a nighttime blue sky. So take a minute and play with that before we get started. I'm going to pause. All right, does anybody have any questions on how their testers are coming? Are you finding your colors okay? Or are you just going right in?
Just going right in.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started as well. I'm going to go like I did in the other ones and start with the sky in the background. And since this one is so hard, you'll hear me scrubbing for a minute. My apologies. Put a little bit in with the tree in the middle. Try to work out to get this one scrubbed in here. Kind of blend that a little bit, see if it moves around. Because I know from my tester, I'm going to go ahead and add that lighter blue on top. I know that I'll need that, so I'll just put it in a couple of the spots. Get a nice little layer. So that looks pretty close to that beginning nighttime sky. And now I'm going back to, so the tree is going to be basically all in shadow. If I'm looking at my thumbnail sketch, it's all shadow. It's all a low value, low key, nice and moody and dark. So I can just lob all that in there. I'm just gonna kind of move that around a little bit because of the paper. Looks like one of those psychiatrist ink blot tests right now. All right, so if I stand back at this point, I can see if my sky is a light enough value or a dark enough value. And I think I can still add, even before I get into the tree, the differences in the tree, I can make my sky a little bit brighter. So I'm taking that second color. I don't need to go any lighter than that second one. But I'm just gonna punch it up just a little bit. Punch up my edges, get some good sky holes and some good shapes forming. I can make trees out of the the branches out of the negative shapes. And just kind of start to block it in that concept. Broken it up quite a bit. It's okay. So let's see, that dark green. So this is just to add that little hint of, you know, reality. Because I blended that blue, the green is looking a little bit brighter, so I'm adding some of that deep, dark, shadowy blue where necessary. And then my medium green is the lightest. Oh, look how bright that is. I don't know. I might have to darken that back up. On screen, it's not so bad. In person, it's pretty bright. So I'm just going to put a layer of that dark green right on top. Let the two kind of play together and sit. That's some nice shadows there. Ooh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot. Nice little moonlit tree. So I'm going to do that again. I'm just dancing this medium, the lighter of the medium greens on top. And then the darker green right over it. And the two together make a nice little moonlit scenario. Add some eggplant in a couple of places. Almost not even necessary. Yeah, both days my favorite one was the nighttime scene. Maybe I need to paint more night. So today's lessons for me, I need a camcorder and I need to paint more nighttime scenes. All right, so I put all three trees next to one another. So we'll keep going, but I'm gonna finish the recording here. So to just quickly discuss the differences, that are, we can clearly see the time of day changes based on the value of all the colors. So I'll stop the recording there. Keep painting, and let me know if you have any questions.